Good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you all. My name is Amy Stillman. I am the Director of Native American Studies, and I have the very delightful duty of opening this evening's program. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the University of Michigan is located on traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, the Three Fire Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, as well as the Wyandot nations. Lands for the university were ceded ceremonially through the treaty at the foot of the rapids in 1817 so that the children of those tribes could be educated. In the university's recently released Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion 2.0 strategic plan, the item named Honoring Article 16 is named as one of 20 campus-wide action items. And I assure you, we shall double down on the work of holding the university accountable. So welcome to the 2023 Berkhofer Lecture, the preeminent annual event organized by the program in Native American Studies here at Michigan. Supported by the generosity of the Tom Shack Family Fund, for which we are deeply grateful, the Berkhofer Lecture is named for Robert J. Berkhofer Jr., a distinguished historian who taught at Michigan from 1973 to 1991 and offered some of the first courses on American Indian history. Past lecturers for the Berkhofer Lecture have included literary and scholarly giants such as Scott Momaday, Joy Harjo, and Robin Wall Kimmerer. We have also showcased breakthrough literary talent such as Tommy Orange, Mary Catherine Nagel, and now Angeline Boulley. All of us in Native American Studies at Michigan are pleased to welcome you all this evening, including those of you who are joining us online from near and far. The invitation to join our live stream was sent out statewide. Tonight's Berkhofer Lecture will be followed tomorrow by a day of activities for Native American youth from across southern Michigan. While on campus, they will visit 2 Native American exhibits at the Museum of Art across the street. They will enjoy a lunch gathering with Angeline Boulley. They will tour the campus and attend panel discussions with U of M Native American students. I'd like to acknowledge the collaboration of participation in planning from the Rackham Graduate School, the U of M Museum of Art, the Center for Educational Outreach, Multi-Ethnic Student Affairs, the RISE Center for Research for Indigenous Social Action and Equity, and the Office of Government Relations. Funding for these activities, and this is the important thank you, funding for these activities has been provided by the Arts and Resistance theme semester, Rackham Graduate School, the Office of Multi-Ethnic Student Affairs, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Center for Education of Women, and the Department of English Language and Literature. And we thank these sponsors for making these events of these 2 days possible. I also want to thank the organizations and units who are participating in our information fair, which is at the back of the room, which showcases some of the Native interest, teaching, and research activities that are going on across our campus, and they are not insubstantial. It's really great. Great time to be at Michigan. And of course, a huge shout out to the members of the Native American Student Association for all of your support tonight. Okay. Okay. I've also been asked to remind you that there is a QR code for an event evaluation form. We hope it will be projected on screen afterwards, but it is available outside on the table, and we would appreciate your feedback after. And also, Angeline Boulley will be signing books after she speaks. But in the meantime, too, we have food. Please do enjoy and make yourselves comfortable. Okay, and now on to our main event. It is my pleasure to call upon my very distinguished colleague, Matthew Fletcher, to do the honors of introducing this evening's speaker. Matthew Fletcher is a member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. At U of M, he is a professor in the Department of American Culture, and he is also the Harry Burns Hutchins Collegiate Professor of Law in the law school. Yeah. It doesn't stop there. Beyond Michigan, he is Chief Justice of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians, the Porch Band of Creek Indians, and the Grand Traverse Band. And he is also an appellate judge of another 10 tribes. Busy man, but very distinguished colleague, Professor Fletcher.
Bonjour. I'm not used to reading introductions. I usually make it up as I go, but I will do this today. Angeline Boulley, a member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, is a storyteller who writes about her Ojibwe community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The daughter of a traditional firekeeper, Angeline also acknowledges being shaped by a network of strong Quawag. She currently lives in Southwest Michigan, but her home will always be Bawatting and Sugar Island. Angeline has a lengthy record of service to Indian education at the tribal, state, and national levels. She served as education director to the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe and sat on the Board of Regents of the Bay Mills Community College. Then was appointed as the director for the Office of Indian Education at the United States Department of Education. Firekeeperʻs Daughter is her debut novel and was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. The book has received numerous awards, including the Walter Dean Myers Award for Outstanding Children's Literature, the Printz Award, and the William C. Morris Award for Young Adult Debut Literature. It was also named an American Indian Youth Literature Award Honor Book. It is the 2023-24 Michigan Great Read by Michigan Humanities. Her second novel, Warrior Girl Unearthed, was released earlier in 2023 and is another #1 New York Times bestseller. Angeline will be accepting the Boston Globe Hornbook Award in a ceremony tomorrow. Please join me in welcoming Angeline Boulley.
Bonjour, Anin, Angeline Boulley, Misko Makwakwe Nadishnakas, Makwadodam, Bawatting, and Donjaba, Chimagwech. Hello, everyone. I'm Angeline Boulley. I am Bear Clan, and I'm from Bawatting, the place of the rapids, Sault Ste. Marie. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. I'm a little bit nervous. If I wear my glasses, I see every face. If I don't, I might not be able to see anything else, but we'll see how this goes. I'm going to start out with This is something that my publisher put together for Target stores. It says, strong Ojibwe women are like the tide, reminding people of forces too strong to control. Weak people fear that strength.
I'm thinking of my mother when the blast changes everything.
I am thinking of my mother. I am thinking of my mother when the blast changes everything. And that begins my book. It also goes into Donis Fontaine saying, I began as a secret and then a scandal. My own story started much earlier. My father is Ojibwe, and he left Sault Ste. Marie as a young man and joined the Navy. He met my mom, who's non-native, and raised us in a little town in southwest Michigan that when I graduated high school, I swore I would never return. I just thought there had to be more excitement to life than a one stoplight town that turned to a blinker at midnight. Spoiler alert, I now live a block away from my parents, and so you can go home again. But my mom and dad, so they love stories. They are both voracious readers. My dad left school after 8th grade, and he is one of the most well-read individuals I know. And my mother, talk about opposites attract. My dad left the Navy and became a truck driver, cross-country, long haul, and my mom doesn't drive at all. And so each Saturday, she would take my siblings and I, we would walk like a mama duck and our little ducklings, and we would have to hit the post office before noon and the bank before noon, and then we could go to the library. And our public library, this is about a mile walk, and my siblings and I would each have our tote bags, and we could check out whatever books we wanted to. And so, of course, every Nancy Drew book, every Hardy Boys, Dana Girls, all these mysteries that I loved. But I also remember checking out books about English royalty, about roses, about architecture. And I'm just so thankful that my parents gave us the gift, the best gift, which is the freedom to read. As long as we were willing to haul everything in our tote bags, there was no limit. Two really important things happened to me when I was a senior at New Buffalo High School. The first is that was the first time I ever read a book that featured a Native American as the main character. Now, I love every book that Lois Duncan has written, except for Stranger with My Face, which was the book. And I couldn't explain at the time why I started to read the book filled with such excitement and realizing, wait, this is the first time a main character was Native. And about quickly into the book, I realized it wasn't a positive experience. It was written by someone who's not Native, and the storyline included some kind of embarrassing stereotypes. I just remember feeling kind of cringy after reading it, and feeling like I know now that it was not good representation. Books for children and teens. Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop has written that books for children and teens serve as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So mirrors that, we can see ourselves reflected in the pages of a book, and windows that we can see into the lives of other people, very different from our own selves. And sliding glass doors, through the safety of the pages of a book, we can step into characters' lives very different from our own, and we can connect with our humanity. We can find commonalities. So I spoke recently at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and their School of Education has the Cooperative Children's Book Center, which has been analyzing books for children and teens for a few decades, quite a few decades. But in 2002, that's when they started separating out or keeping track of the data, books about Native Americans, featuring a character who's Native, and books written by Native Americans. So the actual percentage of books featuring a Native character hasn't changed all that much since 2002. We're lucky if we do hit 1%. Usually we're less than 1%. So out of the 3,500 books each year published in the U.S. For children and teens, around 65 books feature a Native main character. And when the CCBC started to keep track of this data, 9 times out of 10, it was a non-Native person that was getting the book deals. And we've always had incredible storytellers. That's how we survived, was our ability to tell stories and share. And we come from that rich oral tradition. And so the thought that 9 times out of 10, it wasn't us telling our stories. The other important thing that happened to me when I was a senior in high school is that my skin was flawless and my hair was so lush. But we won't get into, that's not this talk. Okay. But my really good friend went to a school nearby, right across the Indiana border, and she told me about this new boy senior year. She thought he might be my type, and I was intrigued because, but then I found out that he didn't play football, and he hung out with the really hardcore partiers that we called stoners back then. And so I never met him. But a month before graduation, my friend said that there had been a huge drug bust in their community, and it turned out that the new boy was actually an undercover police officer. Yes. And this was a couple years before the original 21 Jump Street TV series with Johnny Depp. So I just was astonished that a young-looking law enforcement officer could pose as a high school student as part of an undercover investigation. I remember thinking, what if we had met, and what if we liked each other, or what if it wasn't that we liked each other, but what if he needed my help? And then this spark of an idea that has stayed with me since 1983 was, why would some undercover drug investigation need the help of an ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl? Well, let's flash forward. I went to Central Michigan University. I have both of my degrees from there. I ended up working for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian community in Mount Pleasant. And my first job there, I was a student parent advocate. And so I was a tribal employee but I had an office in the local West Intermediate School, and I had about 45 7th and 8th grade students, Native students, and I would, do tutoring. I would, check on attendance, and I would observe things, and I would see that maybe a whole group of kids would be goofing off in the hallway. But it always seemed like it was the one Native student that would get pulled aside for disciplinary action. And so I would be maybe the only friendly face in that disciplinary meeting. I would also let parents know what their rights were in those meetings. And I would, my goal was to make sure that every student that started that school year would finish that school year. And there was a young man that I really liked, and he was quiet, hardly ever said a word, but just, polite, quiet, kept his head down. But every time it seemed like he would step out of line, someone was right there to catch him. And finally, one day, he just had enough. He was in 8th grade, and finally, one day, he was like, "That's it, I'm out of here." And I remember kind of, walking beside him, and as he's headed towards the front doors of the school, and I'm saying, what could we do to get through the day? No, what could we do to just get through this class period? What are some things, and really just trying to last-ditch effort for him not to leave. And we get to the front door, and the school principal was opening the door, and the young man walked out, and we watched him walk down the walkway and then head for the 3-mile walk to the res. And he said, the school principal said, "What a shame, so much potential." And I wished that I had the courage in that moment to say, "You are literally holding the door open for him." We had plenty of opportunities to reach him. It really galvanized that what I wanted to do was to dedicate my career to working in Indian education, trying to improve public school education for Native students and for all students to learn more about Native peoples, our communities. The more local, the better. The more modern, the better. And I had a really great career. I ended up working as the tribal education director for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, and then I served in the same position for the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians, and then finally being able to live and work in my own tribal community for about 12 years. And during that time, I might not have been writing the story, but I was creating it. So when I would be that young person reading Nancy Drew, I considered it a challenge with each new book. Could I solve that mystery before Nancy did? And so I started to, and then I always joke around that I was raised on, mystery thrillers. And CBS soap operas. So I knew about foreshadowing and, little red herrings and Friday cliffhangers. So my mouth is really dry. So in working in these different Native communities in Michigan, I would see different I would see different situations. I was learning a lot more about my culture, and I started to reverse engineer that spark of an idea for this story. And what I figured out was, well, what if it was a federal drug investigation on a reservation? And what if the drug had a recipe that could be tweaked or manipulated? And what if there was some cultural component about this? And what if this 18-year-old Ojibwe girl was a whiz at chemistry, but she also knew about traditional medicines, how we use plants for healing. And what if this young woman also knew her culture and language and was connected to everybody and everything? She really would be the ideal confidential informant for a federal investigation. But on my reservation and many others, the FBI and the Bureau of Indian Affairs aren't necessarily the good guys. So why would this young woman feel compelled to help with this investigation? Okay, let's reverse engineer again. What if she witnessed a devastating murder that was connected to this deadly drug? And so what if she decided that she would, she wanted to get to the bottom of who was involved in this drug, and that she would conduct her own investigation parallel with the FBI, and she would decide what information she would share with them and what information she would hold back. Because she wasn't just protecting her tribal community, she was also protecting indigenous knowledge. I'll take you back to Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and her often quoted about books for children and teens serving as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Dr. Debbie Reese, who runs the American Indians in Children's Literature blog, she has taken that and said, some of those windows need curtains. This is why representation in literature for children and teens is so important. I had to decide what information I would include in my story, and I realized that I was protecting indigenous knowledge, and that came into some of my decisions I made as an author. So yeah, it only took over 2 decades for me to kind of reverse engineer how the story might be plausible and how I could, write it. But I hadn't studied creative writing in school. I was always good at writing, but pursuing a career as an author wasn't anything that I had really thought of. But I remembered seeing an interview or hearing an interview that singer-songwriter Billy Joel did, and he talked about how he dreamt in music, and that when he would wake up, he'd rush to his piano and play what he had been listening to, in his dreams. And I remember talking with one of my friends about that, and she said that she dreamt in regalia designs. And I thought that was really cool, that something that you're so passionate about, that it finds a way to come out in your dreams. And I guess I always thought everyone dreamt in stories, because I did. But the more that I would talk to people about the things they were passionate about and maybe what they dreamt of, where they just felt so alive, and I realized that most people don't dream in like character arcs and plot, and cliffhangers, and So I thought, well, maybe I am a storyteller then. So I also rethought my experiences, and I realized that every single job I've ever had, no matter what my title was, I always wrote grants as well. It was the only way my programs would really expand was if I found the funding for it. And I thought about it, and grant writing is a form of short storytelling in 40 pages or less, plus attachments. And I was really good at short storytelling in that format. You're creating a compelling narrative about your tribal community and the issue that you want to address, and how you involved community members in coming up with your project approach. And what measures, what outcomes are you looking for? What's your plan for keeping the project on track? And what steps are you going to take if things start to veer off? And why should you be trusted with the funding? I was a really good grant writer. And so I thought, okay, just because my training as a writer, I had never heard of a novelist that had that kind of background that I did, but I realized that just because I hadn't seen it before didn't mean that my experience wasn't as valid as anyone else's. The other thing that finally at age 44, I decided to start writing. My two sons were in high school and my daughter was a preteen. And I told her this idea that I had for this story of this, I called it like Indigenous Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street. But I told my daughter about this and she said, "Mom, that sounds even better than Twilight." And that's a pretty powerful, vote of confidence from a preteen. So with that, when I started writing, it was 2009. I was married. I had 3 kids. I lived in Sault Ste. Marie. I worked for my tribe. And I just started by, I just thought, I give myself permission to write the world's worst draft of a story. And if it goes no further than that, that I can live with that, like that failure. I can live with that easier than I can live with the regret of always having this story idea that just won't leave me. And the regret I would feel if I never, ever tried. So I did, in 2009, I wrote the world's worst first draft, and it was definitely not young adult. But I set it aside for a few weeks and I read it again fresh with writer's eyes, and I saw, there's something to this story. This draft I didn't get it, but maybe if I improve my ability to write dialogue, maybe if I research this element, maybe if I do this. And so then I would, take a pause, get things, do some more research, and then attack my next draft. And when I started, I honestly, my daughter was a preteen, and I thought, okay, it'll take me a year or 2 to write this, and then another year or so to get an agent and then get it. By the time my daughter is in high school, this story will be ready for her. And as you can see, I did not count on it taking 10 years of writing and revising. And by the time my book did publish, she was a senior in college. But each draft, I felt stronger. I did more research. I realized maybe in some of my, those middle drafts, it was like, I'm going to share every bit of cultural information I have. And it wasn't until I was, well into this process that I was like, wait, there's some things I need to hold back. And I don't think I would have written as nuanced and layered and complex a story. I'm glad that those previous drafts did not get published. And I'm glad that I had the life experience and everything that just culminated in that final draft. So about halfway through that 10-year process, I learned about the hero's journey, which I first thought that I discovered it, but then I quickly found out that no, it's a real thing, and it's someone else studied it way before I did. Or I had one kid that loved Harry Potter and one kid that loved Star Wars. And I remember telling them, like, you do realize that the first Harry Potter movie and Star Wars A New Hope Episode 4, it's the same story, like even to the point of this seemingly average person gets, this call to adventure, and they even have their uncle like refuse the call on their behalf, but then guided by this like mentor person, and they enter this unknown world and they discover previously hidden talents. They make friends. They also gain enemies. And they're on a quest for something that they think that they want. When they finally do face that final true adversary, whether or not they're successful in getting what they thought that they wanted, sometimes they get what they needed and not what they wanted. They're forever transformed by this journey that they've gone through. And even when they do return to the ordinary world, they're forever changed. They're not the same person. And we see the hero's journey in so many popular movies and books. But I thought about we Indigenous people, we have our hero stories too. So we Ojibwe people have a character, Nana Bush or Nana Bojo, and he is on this epic journey, and he'll encounter Rabbit, and you learn like how Rabbit got its long ears or how Porcupine got its quills. And sometimes, a lot of times, the stories are at his expense. So sometimes he's kind of goofy. But so we have these stories. And I started to think about this ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl and how I would frame that story, how I would tell the hero's journey from her perspective. And that 5 years into that 10-year process of writing and revising, I had my eureka moment. So I had seen this graphic depiction of the hero's journey, and it looks like a pizza cut into 4 slices, and the main plot points are around the edge of it. And then right after that, I was searching for something else, and I came across the Ojibwe medicine wheel. And this one is by Keweenaw Bay Indian Community. And usually I see it and it's tilted on its axis a bit, but this time I saw it and it was the same slices and same angles as the hero's journey. And I thought, our Ojibwe medicine wheel has so many teachings, our 4 cardinal directions, the 4 stages of life, the 4 seasons, 4 traditional colors, 4 traditional medicines. It's just so rich with teachings. And I thought, what if I overlaid it? And I used the medicine wheel as a cultural framework for telling the hero's journey from this ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl's experience. And that was the day that I knew my book would get published. I just knew. I had never seen that done before, and it was exactly the type of story I would have loved to have read as an 18-year-old or in high school. So that only took, like 35 years at that point from idea to, I pitched my book on my manuscript on Twitter. I don't recommend that now. But at that time, I participated in a one-day pitching event where this one was #DVPit, Diverse Voices Pitch. Getting back to that, only 1% of all books published for children and teens features a Native American as the main character. And so on this day between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., you tweet out the elevator pitch of your story. And so I pitched out, when 18-year-old Daunis witnesses the murder of a loved one, she must use her science geekery and knowledge about her Ojibwe culture to protect her tribal community before she loses anyone else. Well, literary agents looking to sign new clients and editors at publishing houses looking to publish authors, if they liked that tweet, it was considered an invitation to follow up with them. I had 60 literary agents and 20 editors at publishing houses that liked that tweet. It took me a month to research all 60 literary agents and come up with my top 10 dream list. And I added 2 more agents, so I had a top 12. And my path to publication is the exact opposite of the phrase, hurry up and wait. Mine is the opposite. My journey was decades of this roller coaster, taking a really, really decades-long journey to get to the top of that very first peak. And you know you're getting close when you hear that like clink, clink, clink. And then it took off. Within 2 weeks of querying my top 12 list, I signed with a literary agent. I worked over the summer of 2019 on some revisions based on my agent's feedback. And we took the manuscript out on submission in the fall. And 2 weeks later, there was a 12-bidder auction for the North American publishing rights to my book. And I sold the publishing rights at auction for 7 figures, so in excess of $1 million. Now, I was a nobody in the publishing world. Like, this deal caught people by, they were like, wait, what is happening? I had not graduated from a prestigious Master of Fine Arts program. I hadn't studied I didn't come from, the pipeline of the prestigious writer retreats and workshops and that. I was a nobody. And 2 weeks later, I sold the film rights to the Obamas for a Netflix series. And Reese Witherspoon picked my book for her young adult book club. And a few days before my book was published, I was interviewed by Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, and she dressed specifically to match the graphics, and she was just a very lovely person. So 36 years after that spark of an idea, my book debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's been on the list a total of 31 weeks, not all consecutively. And it's won some incredible awards. And one of my favorite accolades is it was Time Magazine named it it's number 100 on the list of 100 best young adult books of all time. And when I blasted that news on all of my social media, I had one of my friends message me, and she said, I really love your book. I think it should be higher than number 100, though. And I replied back, the list is in chronological order. It starts with Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and it ends with Firekeeperʻs Daughter. So I'm very happy. And my book had only been out 2 months at that time. So I was like, I'm really good with being number 100. I have since signed 22 foreign rights deals. And so Firekeeperʻs Daughter is being translated and published across the globe. I love, the awards and the bestseller. Don't get me wrong, I love that. But to me, what it shows is, so the Irish writer James Joyce, he wrote that in the particular we find the universal. And what these awards and success means to me is that publishing is a business, and that a story about an 18-year-old ordinary Ojibwe girl from a reservation, from a tribe in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, that a story about, written by someone from that community, that it can show that it's a commercial and literary success. It means that more nobodies like me are going to get their shot at publishing, and that we can turn that 9 times out of 10, the story that the author that would get the deal is non-native. We're flipping that, and now you look at the list of books that are being published, and there are so many Native authors that are finally getting their shot. And so I'm so happy to be part of this wave, that I sincerely hope that the push to publish underrepresented voices is not a blip. I hope that it's something that we can hold on to. So it's been nonstop roller coaster ride since 2021. I love meeting with readers and connecting with them. My favorite things are when a teacher says that a reluctant reader, that they couldn't wait to get through my book, and they were like eager to talk about it in class. I spoke at Kalamazoo Valley Community College earlier this spring, and there was an older gentleman that came up to me afterwards, and I signed his book, and he said, "I just wanted you to know that this is the first book I've read since high school." And I just was like astonished in that, well, why my book, or why, this? When my book came out, we were a year into the pandemic. And so for the first 6 months, most of my events, we would be masked if we did do them in person. And it happened, it's happened a number of times that a Native woman would come up to me and want to tell me what the book meant to her. And she would get choked up, and I would get choked up because I wanted to ask her, did I get our story right? And she would let me know that she felt seen. And that was really good, very special. My second book came out May 2nd. It too has been on the New York Times bestseller list. And it also recently, it won the Boston Globe's Hornbook Award. And so I'll be accepting the award tomorrow. It's a virtual event, so I'll be streaming it from here. But if I pitched my first book as Indigenous Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street, I pitched Warrior Girl Unearthed as Indigenous Lara Croft. But instead of raiding tombs, the main character's raiding museums and private collections to retrieve our stolen ancestors and sacred items that have no business being in a museum, when there's a federal law that says tribes and other eligible entities have every right to request the return of ancestors and sacred items. Oh, and she's 16, so none of her heists go the way that she plans. So, yeah. But this is me with my dad. Matthew alluded to him. Yes, my dad is a firekeeper in our community, and he helps other communities too. So he strikes that ceremonial fire when we have ceremony, when we hold a language conference or a fasting camp or a funeral. That fire is struck, and it burns day and night until the event is done. And I've sat with my dad. I've sat with my dad at the fire many times, and he tells stories while he's there. And he tells stories that he never told us when we were growing up. And each time I sit with my dad on the fire, it's like, learning so much more about him. And I'm just grateful. The picture of us, that was March 16th, 2021. I had found out that my virtual book launch was going to be delayed by 2 days because the person that was going to be interviewing me wasn't available. So I decided to launch my book in my tribal community. So we drove up to Sault Ste. Marie, and I was able to sign books and be there in my community for this book reaching the world. So with that, I think we're going to do a little bit of question and answer. And what I'd like to leave you with is every time I hear a land acknowledgement, I want there to be action tied to it. And so I encourage you, every time you hear a land acknowledgement, read a book by an Indigenous author. It doesn't cost you anything. Request it from the library, purchase it if you can, but then rate it online, review it online, and recommend it to people. Those activities cost you nothing, but that's gold to Indigenous authors like myself who are showing publishing that our books, that there's a market for our stories and that our stories are best told when we are deciding. I had a mantra during that 10 years of writing and revising that I still live by now, and it's, I write to preserve my culture and I edit to protect it. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, and miigwech again for the opportunity to share with you tonight.
Miigwech, Angeline. We have microphones, so if you have a question, please raise your hand. We're happy to deliver a mic to you, and please wait for the mic.
All right, awesome. What would you say is do you have a tip for getting past writer's block?
Yeah, I try to figure out why I'm having writer's block. If it's that I just don't know what the next that scene is, but I know the one that comes after it, I'll skip over. And then a lot of times writing the next scene that I know for sure helps me to go back and fill in. Other times, like if I'm writing a really, my books contain some really intense topics: teen dating violence, suicide, sexual assault. And if I'm going to be writing a really intense scene, I make sure that I'm well rested, that I've eaten well, that that I'm in a good place. And if I'm not, if I'm feeling tired or run down, I don't write that scene on that day. I wait until I'm in a good place. And then I try to be creative in all different ways, because sometimes that's just the conduit to, it's starting to flow. So I'll create playlists of different characters, like what music do they listen to? I always feel like if I know what music they listen to, then I know insight into that character. So I just find ways to be creative and think about story. And my favorite thing absolutely is when I wake up and that space in between sleep and wake, when the perfect line of dialogue will come to me, or the answer to a plot hole or something. And I just love that when that happens.
Thank you. So you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I am curious as to kind of where you draw the line between what knowledge to share and what to protect.
Well, I think when I was developing my craft and I was like eager to share everything that I knew, and then at a certain point I realized, like, wait, I shouldn't be describing what happens inside that sweat lodge. Only, like, there's a responsibility, and I don't believe ceremony should be shared with anyone outside of that ceremony. But I do know the healing power of our ceremonies. And so in Firekeeperʻs Daughter, there's a yellow pansy ceremony that is held towards the end of the book. And I invented that because I really felt it served an important purpose, but I didn't want to take anything from anything that I had actually been a part of. So, yeah. And that's something that Indigenous authors, that's something that we do. Like, I'm answerable to my community. I'm answerable to, I always think of like what one particular cousin of mine, like what she's going to think about this, or that I put it in there. And I always feel like I have to be able to say why I did. And that's something that a non-Native person writing a story set in my community doesn't have that same sense of obligation or commitment to the community. And that's why representation in books for children and teens is so important.
Can you give us a list of resources or ways that we can find books not only for the children and young adults, but for adults as well?
Absolutely. So I mentioned Dr. Debbie Reese and her blog, American Indians in Children's Literature. And each year she comes up with a best of list, and it's the best picture books, the best, chapter books, middle grade, young adult, graphic novel, nonfiction, and adult crossover. And those lists are available. And she also, if there's a book that she does not recommend, she includes her review, her analysis of why. And I think sometimes teachers are so afraid of doing something wrong or getting it wrong that they opt not to include, or they're, hesitant. But a resource, a free resource like this, blog spot, it really helps you to learn what questions to ask when you're selecting a book for a lesson.
Hi, I have a couple questions. The first one might be real quick is, what are all the languages like that are not common that are translated, that your book's been translated into? So like has it been translated into indigenous languages and such, or lesser known languages?
It has not been translated into it's not translated into Ojibwe. If it was, it would be like a 10-volume, but gosh, every foreign deal so far, they've used the same cover art and the same title, except for France changed the name to A Dose of Rage. And so it's really neat to see like the Dutch version. Everything's translated into Dutch except for the Ojibwe words, and I have, a deal in South Korea and Japan and Brazil and Spain, Italy,
Okay. The second question is, have you thought about having it in a curriculum for schools at all? Or
Yes. So my publisher's website, Macmillan is who I'm published with. They worked with, they have a free downloadable book discussion guide for like book clubs, and then a teacher's guide that's aligned with Common Core standards. And so there's resources there on both books. And then Firekeeperʻs Daughter being named as the Great Michigan Read, they worked with Eric Hemingway from Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, and they have a free resource, and it's a guide for readers, and then a guide for teachers, and it just provides so much context and good information about Native communities in Michigan.
So if someone wanted to get your book into a curriculum, is there a person to contact on your website?
Yeah. My website is angelineboulley.com, and my publisher's website, they have all of that information and resources too.
With so many drafts, how did you know that it was the final draft?
Okay, if writing is an exercise, I felt that I had written to the point of exhaustion. I could not think of any other way to improve upon the story. I just couldn't think of anything else I could do. And so that's when Of course, after I got my book deal, I ended up changing a lot and rewriting about 75% of it and adding 100 more pages, and yeah. And then for the second book, I only had 1 year to write it, so it was a much different writing experience. And then it hasn't been announced publicly yet, but it will be shortly. My publisher preemptively offered me a deal for books 3 and 4, so it'll be a 4-book set. Well, perhaps one more question, and then I'm happy to answer individual questions during the signing line. So who wants the responsibility of the last question?
Hi, thank you so much for coming and talking and telling us your stories. I really loved the book, and my wife really loved the book, and she's actually presenting on your book at our local library, so that's very exciting. But I just wanted to ask, as somebody who has done on-the-ground work and creative work, and this is like an oversimplified question, but I know there are pros and cons to both on-the-ground work and like creative work and art, but which do you prefer and why?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes. So you've done like on the ground work, like talking and working within your community, and you are also, a writer, a creative writer, and expressing, care for your community in that way. And on the ground work can be kind of exhausting, but you're working directly with your community, and art sometimes can be seen as not direct work. So I was just wondering, what you think of that.
Okay. Yeah, I could not have written this story without having done the on-the-ground work. If I had tried to write the story even at 18, it would have been a very sappy romance. And so I really needed that on-the-ground work and, to be able to write the story that I do think sometimes that through the power of a book, that I've been able to reach more people with the issues that I care about than even when I was working at my dream job in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Education. So I really do believe that art is a powerful force, and stories are good medicine, and so, yeah. Well, thank you.